Hello ladies and gentlemen, how are you guys doing today? Hope you guys are doing alright. My name is Sam Spielberg and thank you guys for tuning into today's video. So a couple months ago, about a month ago, I was asked to demonstrate some ways to increase the quality of your scene inside of Source Filmmaker via lighting or cameras, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today for a little bit. I'm going to be talking about ways that you can improve your scene in Source Filmmaker using primarily through cameras and lighting a little bit. And yeah, we're going to pretty much jump right in to that. Before we do, this video assumes that you watching that you have a basic knowledge of Source Filmmaker, and by basic I mean that you've made something inside of Source Filmmaker, poster, a short film, or something, that you know how to use the program, that you're not going to be completely lost when I start saying stuff like animation set editor, or maybe even element viewer, or screen space ambient occlusion, or progressive refinement, or anything like that. If you are not familiar with Source Filmmaker, I would recommend that you shut this tutorial down, go check out the Source Filmmaker channel. They have tutorials there made by people who made the program. Go check those out. If you are familiar with Source Filmmaker, stick around and we'll jump right in. Also, I am not a professional. I have not been professionally trained. I haven't gone to school for this. This is very much just based off of my knowledge, my experience, and this I really wouldn't call this a tutorial, more of as a guide. This is, yeah, very much more of a guide just to see someone work in Source Filmmaker. This is stuff that I do. This is based off of my experience. And this is the idea for this would be to serve more of as a guide. There are going to be some basic like objective things that I use, rule of thirds, 3-point lighting and stuff. I'm not going to go into details on those. This is just seeing a Source Filmmaker user at work, and the hope would be that this serves as a guide. That being said, forgive me if I go on tangents or ramble, or if there's some editing that happens. Yeah, that being said, let's get right into it. So for this first bit, I'm going to go ahead and talk about cameras. I'm going to go over the basics of cameras right quick just to serve as a bit of a refresher. So I'm going to go ahead and default these camera settings, and I'll just go over them very briefly. In order to move the camera, you have to have it selected, and it must be you must be in either the motion editor or the graph editor. I prefer the motion editor. And to move the camera, you hold down left click. Put your mouse in the viewport, hold down left click, you move the camera with W, A, S, and D like you would a video game. Let me turn off a few settings here so we can get some more performance out of this. So I'll turn off a few things here, turn off the lighting, and we'll discuss the lighting later. Right now I'm just going to focus on the camera. So again, with your mouse in the viewport, hold down left mouse button, W, A, S, and D to move your camera around, very similar to a first-person shooter. If you want to go up, hold down Z. If you want to go down, hold down X. If you want to move fast, hold down Shift in connection with any of the other buttons, any of the other movement buttons. If you want to move slowly, you can hold down Control, again with any other movement button. If you want to... Oh, what did I break there? Alright, I think you can pan. No, you cannot. You cannot pan. Can you? You cannot. If you want to rotate around an object, if you hold down Alt and then move your camera, you can rotate around an object. Let me show you. There you go. So you hold down Alt and then click and drag with your mouse, and that'll rotate around an object. You can also rotate your camera if you hold down R. That'll allow you to rotate your camera. You can zoom in and out, change the FOV, the field of view of the camera with the mouse wheel. And that will change the field of view of the camera. Is there anything else that I've forgotten? That is, yes, that is it. So those are the basic functionalities. Those are the basic functions of the camera. I'm going to go right quick into a few of these settings right over here. Field of view is pretty self-explanatory. Again, you can control that with the mouse wheel. You can also control that with the slider if you have your camera selected in the viewport, in the animation set editor rather. You can control that with the slider. There's another way you can control the field of view. I'll talk about that in a second. We also have focal distance and aperture. These two work together. The focal distance controls what is going to be in focus, and the aperture controls how much everything else is going to be out of focus. So with the focal distance slider, you see this purple plane that appears in the viewport. Anything that is directly on that plane will be in focus. Anything before and after it, anything in the foreground and background will be blurred out. And the aperture controls how blurred out they will be. So I'll give you an extreme example right here. We have the focal distance slider, the focal plane on Mr. Freeman here. If we switch to the clip editor, and also if we turn on progressive refinement depth of field, there you go. You can see that Freeman is in focus, but everything in the background, and you can't really see in the foreground, but if there was something in the foreground, it would be blurred. And you can control the blur again with the aperture. So we'll set it down just a little bit. That's a little bit nicer. We'll increase it a little bit. And there we go. That brings a nice focus without getting rid of too much background detail. So we can still see the setting, but the main focus is, of course, on Mr. Freeman here. And if we were to, we can also decrease. We can set the focal plane somewhere else, so we can put Mr. Freeman out of focus. We can also animate this right quick to bring Mr. Freeman back into focus. So that's not something that you can readily see, but you can see a bit of a difference if we switch it. So that's the focal and aperture sliders. Next up, we have the tone map scale slider. This controls the lighting of the map. If I turn on lighting, we can see that this controls the lighting of the map. This is very similar to the exposure setting you would have on a camera. This is pretty much the exposure setting. It allows you to let more light in from pre-existing light that's built into the map. That's what the tone map scale slider does. Below it we have the bloom scale, and let me turn up the tone map scale a bit. The bloom scale controls the bloom of the scene based off of the lighting. As you can see, if we increase it, we get a lot more bloom, a lot more softer, blurrier lighting effects in our shot. And that can be controlled with the bloom. My default setting for the bloom usually is to turn bloom completely off. I like my images to be a little sharper, a little crisper. Occasionally I'll use the bloom. I may even use the bloom here later on in this video, but for now, and in general, I usually like to keep it off. Below that, we have screen space ambient occlusion settings. This gets a little fuzzy for me because I'm not 100% sure what screen space ambient occlusion is in general. In layman's terms, it is some shadow enhancement stuff. So ambient occlusion itself is just a little enhancer for the shadows and shading of models. You can see if we turn it off here, we get less detailed shadows. And if we turn it back on, we get a little bit more detail in the shadows. Let's see. And these three settings, set at default, are decent enough, but you can manipulate them. And I'll go ahead and turn this on so we can see more of what we got here. So the bias and the strength seem to work in conjunction together. You can see there's a little bit of visual difference with the bias. I'm not entirely sure what the bias does, but the strength is obviously the most, it's probably the most self-explanatory. Controls how strong the screen space ambient occlusion is going to be. You can see the shadows get a lot darker around the edges and kind of and in areas of shadow, and we get a lot, we get some darker shadows around the edging. If we don't like that, we can control the radius of the screen space ambient occlusion with this last slider here, and that'll control the radius. So yeah, again, for me, these aren't exact sciences. I usually end up messing around to whatever kind of looks good. I do have a couple defaults though for kind of an outside setting, like a sunny day, or if a character is outside, I will set the AO strength and bias to somewhere around this. To much higher settings, and then I'll decrease the radius just a hair. And then if we're like indoors, if we're in an indoor setting, we'll decrease these, or maybe even leave them at default and maybe increase the radius just a little bit, ever so much. And that's it. That's a bare bones explanation of the camera settings. And now we're going to take I'm just gonna kind of ramble about cameras for a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and set up a camera for this scene. I do have a few presets that I may use for reference, but I'm going to go ahead and set up a camera from scratch and just kind of walk through my thought process when setting up a camera. You'll notice I don't have any lights set up. I do have a lighting set up, and I will talk about that maybe in another video, at least not right now. I'm going to be focusing on the camera. So let's do it. So another thing I forgot to mention with the field of view setting slider is that there are some presets. There are some preset sliders for the field of view of cameras. They are set to mimic real-world lenses. So if we select our field of view option here in the camera, and we go over here if we go over here to the lenses tab, we can see we have some presets here. And if we fiddle around with them, we can see that they change the field of view of the camera. And again, these sliders, minus the 90-degree vertical field of view, are set to mimic real-world lenses. So we have 10.8, 14, 17, 24. These are good for your wide-angle shots. So if we want to get a wide angle of Mr. Freeman here, I'll go ahead and select the whole camera, and this is the 14mm preset. Then we could do something like this. This would give us a very wide shot with Mr. Freeman down the center, with the buildings off to the left and right, covering the thirds, with Mr. Freeman and the moon straight in the center. We could cut out a little bit more with the 17, cut out just a little bit more, get a little bit more focus on the center, using the 24mm, and then we have our 35 and 50mm. These are good for your medium shots, so if we wanted to get again, if we were at a distance, we could keep increasing the range. We could go from a 10mm to all the way to 108. 108 and your 85, these are good for close-ups, showing up things at a distance, or if we needed to get really close in on a character, show a specific detail, get a tight shot on a face. Right here we're pulling off some kind of Michael Bay deal where we get a nice telephoto rotation with focusing purely on the face. So yeah, your 85 and your 105, these are good for close-ups, showing things in the distance or getting really up close and personal. Your 35 and your 50, these are good for mid shots, middle shots, good for profiles, good for showing. They're good balanced lenses. So that's a quick, brief explanation of the lens presets. So now I'm going to go ahead and just kind of frame up this shot in several different ways. And I'm just going to go ahead and use a, yes, I know. I'm just going to go ahead and create a new camera. We're going to use a new camera completely. We're going to go ahead and frame up the shot using a stock camera. Let's see what I'm looking for. So what I would be looking for initially would be a shot that displays the setting, that appropriately displays where Freeman is, and I would also look for a shot that adequately shows Freeman, as much of him as we need. So the three important things here, well, again, the two important things are Freeman and the setting. So we're going to need a shot that adequately shows both of those things. I'm going to use this side. I'm primarily going to be focusing. I'm going to have Freeman. Let's see. I'm probably going to keep the camera to the right side of Freeman, so that we can show the action. So that we can show his action being directed toward the right versus the left. But I like the background of this a little bit more. I like the visual of I like the way the building looks. We've got some contrast with the blacks and whites. Those kind of help out with Freeman, who himself is dressed in black and white. It's a little more visually pleasing. So we're going to stick with that building as a background. Now we're going to decide kind of at what angle the camera should be. So something like this. This is okay. I don't really like it, though. This is good because it shows a whole lot of the environment. It shows the street, it shows the building, it shows the background, the moon. We get a good glimpse of the time of day. But Freeman is pretty small. in this scene. Freeman is very small, and that kind of feels weird because he looks very intimidating, and he's wielding a rifle. We don't really want him to look small, and because he looks small, everything else kind of feels out of balance. I mean, the lampposts are bigger than him; they're more intimidating than him, and that's really not what we're looking for. So we want to find an angle that kind of that really pronounces Freeman's presence, that really gives some weight and power to him. And this angle, while it does display the environment better, is not really what we're looking for. So if we were to get a bit more up close and personal, and I'll go ahead and change the field of view. I'll be using these sliders. I'm going to use a 50 millimeter. So right here, this is a nice shot. This is a nice shot for getting more up close and personal, and here we can see more detail. Let me change the focal distance and increase the aperture. I'm going to get rid of the bloom, and yeah, let me turn off motion blur right quick. So right here, this is an alright shot for displaying Freeman. We get a good glimpse at his face. We get a good glimpse at the assault rifle. We get a good idea of the action that's going on with Freeman, and we get a good idea of Freeman. The problem is that we don't really get a good idea of his environment. We can see something in the background. We can assume that it's a building, probably. We don't really know. So, as far as showing off Freeman, this is a nice shot. But if this is our first shot, if this is the establishing shot, we have no idea where he is. We can't see what's behind him. We don't know anything about his environment. And it's not entirely clear that it's a building he's standing behind. So this is not a good shot for displaying the environment and Freeman. It's a good shot for showing Freeman, but it's not for showing the environment. So that's what we kind of want, is a balance between the two. So let's try and see if we can get that. Now something like, let's see. So let's kind of open up our field of view just a little bit here. Now this looks pretty good. So what we've done is we've backed the camera up a little bit. We've backed it up to where we're cutting him off kind of at the waist. I have these black bars enabled, so if we disable those, we're cutting him off at the thighs. But if we have those enabled, and I like the black bars. So we're cutting him off kind of at the groin, a little bit at the waist. If we push in a little bit, we can cut him off just a hair more. Or if we pull out a little bit, let's cut him off. Let's cut him off kind of at the groin. Let's do that. Oh my god. Let's change the focal distance again so that we get him in shot. The aperture's pretty good. We'll leave that as it is. And actually, let's just take off the aperture for the moment. So this is a good shot. This gives us a good full frame of Freeman. We get to see the assault rifle. Someone's going to get onto me for that. We get to see the rifle. We get to see Freeman. We get to see his very nice suit. We get a good enough picture of the background. We can see more of the background. We see these light posts. We can probably, if we were to turn on the lighting, we could probably determine that this is a light post. And in fact, I'll just go ahead and prove that right now. I'll turn on the lighting setting that I have. Turn on the lights. Turn on the lights. Turn on lighting. And that didn't really help, did it? Okay, well, we'll worry about that later. But for now, the camera angle is pretty good. I think we'll change it, but this is a good example of what I would be looking for, because we can see the building. We can now see that it is a building. We can see a little bit of a sidewalk. We can see the lamps. We can probably determine that this is the front of a building, and then we can take a look at the building and determine that it's an urban-looking building. Ergo, we kind of get a better grasp of where Freeman is. So I'm not entirely happy with it, but it's a good enough angle. It's a good enough angle. It shows Freeman full on. It also, if we play out the sequence, shows his action very well. It shows where the action is being. It shows where the action and the energy is being directed. He's shooting off screen. It's balanced well enough. The color is pretty good. There's contrast between. Not a contrast. There's a complementary. There's the complement. The building complements Freeman's attire. And yeah, that's a pretty balanced shot. I think we can do better though. So it's a good balance. It's got a good balance to it, but I think I'm going to change that up. So if I move the camera back just a little bit, I'm going to cut him off at the knees. Actually, I'm going to, let's see, should I zoom in? I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. No, I'm not going to zoom in. I'm going to go back to the 30 mil. I'm going to cut him off at the knees, and I'm going to put him center. I'm going to put him front and center, so that we can get a little bit more of the environment. So we can kind of see a little bit more of the building. And this is, yeah, this is pretty good. And this puts Freeman more at the center of attention. What else could we do? Is there any way that we can include more of the environment? Maybe. One thing we could do is we could kind of get up closer to Freeman. This might be... So this could be an interesting shot. We get more of the environment, and we get a decent amount of Freeman. He takes up a third, and then we've got he takes up just enough room, and then we've got the rest of the room to see the environment he's in. We see the street, we see the moon, we get a sense of time and day. But here's the thing. The energy feels a little bit misdirected. So let me try and explain that. We have a lot of, while we are showing the environment here, and that can be a good thing, it's pretty empty. There's not a whole lot else to it. So it would kind of be up to us to decide what we really want to show. And while this does show more of the environment, I feel that the energy is a little bit misdirected, because the center of attention is not the environment. The center of attention is Freeman firing his rifle, and that's at a different angle. He's firing off screen, and we don't give him a whole lot. We don't give him a whole lot of room to display his action, whereas we do give a ton of room and attention to the background and to the environment. So there is a way we could fix that. We could set the focal distance on Freeman, and we could increase the aperture to kind of blur out the background. And that right there feels okay, but again, it feels a little misdirected. The energy just kind of feels a little misdirected. So, yeah. And again, that's not a bad shot. It just feels a little misdirected. So, I would probably want something like this. I would probably want to keep Freeman in the left hand, because he's looking right. I don't want to keep him right and have him looking right. I want to have him left and looking left, because then we can see he's focusing more on this end, and that tells us, the viewer, that there is more going on this end. So if we were to suddenly switch angles, then it would make sense. Whereas here, if we were to show Freeman looking off to the right, and then we were to switch right, it would be a little jarring, because our eyes are a little bit more drawn to the big empty area, because it's like, well, there's a lot more going on over here. So, I don't know. You could do that. I'm not really happy with that camera choice, so we're gonna move away from that. And we're gonna get something like that. Immediately, something like that. That's all right. I'm not too concerned about the environment. I'm more concerned about Freeman. And I think, yeah, that's another reason why I don't really like that shot, is because it shows way too much of something that we're really not concerned of. It's really, and we have to try really hard to bring the attention back. I mean, we had to set the aperture to something kind of ridiculous. I mean, it's a little too ridiculous. We could bring it down. But we're giving a whole lot of space to something that really doesn't need that much space. Freeman, I feel, needs a lot more space, because he's the center of attention. He's Gordon Freeman, man. You give him the attention. You don't give the moon and stuff the attention. You can, and that helps set the environment and the feel and the mood, but we're giving far too much attention to it. So let's give it back to Freeman. This shot right here is pretty good, and it keeps the environment intact. And again, we can manipulate that with the lighting. We'll get into that later. So for a single steady for a single shot, this is pretty good. This communicates well what needs to be communicated. And I think we could even... There's a couple other things we could do. One is we could get kind of like an overhead shot, except we couldn't because that looks stupid as all get out. It actually makes Freeman look pretty small. Again, that was a problem we had in the beginning, was that Freeman looked too small. Freeman wasn't as demanding, he wasn't as intimidating, he wasn't as powerful. And this up angle doesn't really give us that. So if we were to go back to our original angle, we can kind of see that we're looking up at Freeman just a little bit, just enough to kind of sell it. I think we're gonna go down just a little bit more to where we're really looking up at him. There we go. That's nice. That's big. That's powerful. I like that. Now, another concern, and quite one that's really easy to fix, we'll just kind of pitch a little bit this way. I was worried that the scope might kind of block his face, because it is important to kind of see that he's gritting his teeth, he's angry, or he's mad, or it's important for us, especially when displaying the power, is to a lot of that power can also come from the face. So it's important that we don't hide or obstruct the face with the weapon, which we do a little bit, but it could be worse. It could be like this, and that's really not good because we can't see Freeman's face, and we want to see his face. So something like this is pretty good. I'm actually just going to go ahead and rotate the camera because that seems to fit a little bit more. Because right here we have these diagonal. Because right here nothing is really straight. Everything's kind of at an angle, and that looks pretty cool. But I think, if we were to turn the camera, that gives it a little. That kind of sets everything straight. The camera now meets the camera is now at the same angles as all the other diagonals, so everything's a little bit more uniform, and it also looks pretty cool. We could also probably even counteract. No, we can't counteract it because then the barrel gets. I don't know. We could, but I think we're going to keep it like that, and maybe move the camera up a little bit, like that. So that's a pretty good. That's pretty good. That's pretty cool looking. And it could go either way. We could revert it back to a straight angle. We could rotate it. I don't know. I'll leave that as optional, but I think we're going to leave it like that. So that's pretty good. I like the camera angle. But I did have time to mess with this beforehand, and I did have an original camera set up. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that right quick. And this, I decided to go from a static camera to a moving camera. And the decision behind this was to show pretty much as possible. So we get a little bit, you could even say we get a little bit of a story here. So we first show Freeman's face. It's disguised by his glasses, his dark sunglasses. We can't see his eyes, but as we move out, we can see his face. And then as we continue to move out, we can see his gun. And then that says to us, "Oh shoot. He's got a gun. Oh shoot, he's got a gun. He's mad. He's upset, and we can't see his eyes, and that adds to an intimidation factor. And then as we continue to move out, we see that he is firing the gun. He's shooting around. He's moving. He's pivoting. He's shooting at things that are off screen. Again, we can't see him, but it's not really important. We're still taking in this scene. He's firing, and we're still moving out. And then we can see in the background the building. We've got a hint of an urban area, and I'll just go ahead and spoil the rest of it. We'll turn on the lighting, we'll turn on the particle effects, we'll just go full force in this, and whoa, what did I turn on? I did not mean to turn those on. Alright, here's what we got. And again, we don't get a whole lot of the environment, but again, the environment is not the important bit. The important bit is Freeman. If we get enough information as to the environment, that's fine. And I think that we've accomplished that with both of these angles. So with the original moving camera and then with the static camera, we've made it clear where he is and what's going on. Again, the lighting could be worked on a little bit to kind of help sell the environment, but I think it's good enough. And lighting is not what we're focusing on right now, so we're just focusing on cameras. And I think we've done a pretty good job. I think I destroyed the... That's right, I did. So I ruined the tone map scale. So let's set that tone map scale back to the default, which is 0.1. There we go. That helps a ton. That helps us see the building. That helps us see a lot more. And again, look, the lighting could be changed, but that's not what we're worried about. We're worried about getting the camera angle, and then we can adjust the lighting as necessary. So, yeah, that was... I don't even know how long that was. That felt like 20 minutes. So that was a look at the cameras. That was a look at my thought process going into setting up and composing the camera, setting up a composition for this scene. I think I'm going to end it right there. That was pretty long. So yeah, that's it. Next we'll talk about lighting, but I'm going to take a break first. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any questions about this guide, if you guys have any questions about the camera, anything I said, if you guys have any questions about Source Filmmaker, if you guys have any ideas or suggestions for things you guys would like me to talk about next for Source Filmmaker, if you guys have any questions in general, please feel free to put them down. I'll do my best to get back to you, to write an answer to that comment, or maybe even to make a video about it. No promises, but we'll see. Would be happy to talk to you guys. Yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you guys for watching. And I will see you guys when I see you guys. Take care.